Hey guys, it's Kevin again, my review for Lightyear. And this, of course, is pretty much the film that Andy, saw in 1995 that ultimately got him to make the decision to purchase a Buzz Lightyear. We focus on a fictitious Buzz Lightyear, not the one we're used to within the Toy Story franchise, but this Buzz Lightyear is this very overconfident, very young space ranger. He wants to be the greatest within the galaxy. He's not quite a space ranger yet. He's a test pilot, and he ends up going on this mission that ends up with him being marooned on this planet for well over a year. And after getting stuck here, he basically has to try to find a way back home, but there are many obstacles that do get in the way, and it's up to Buzz to find a way to overcome them. So Lightyear, I was very excited for this movie. Look, I mean, as you can see from my shirt, I'm a pretty big Toy Story fan, as you guys know. I think just Pixar in general is one of the best, if not the best, animated studio working today. I've always had such a deep admiration for Pixar, but specifically the Toy Story franchise. I think it's just one that is so timeless and wholesome, and they bring about such complex ideas to children's toys. And you know, when I first heard they were doing a Lightyear spinoff, I was very unsure how to feel about it. I was like, on one hand, I love the Buzz Lightyear character. I'm all for them doing more things with these characters after Toy Story 4 with the way everything wrapped up. But at the same time, I was on the fence because I kind of felt like, you know, Toy Story 4 was a great way to wrap up pretty much everything. We don't need to keep going back to these characters. There are other things that you can visit. There are other projects out there that might have worked. So I really didn't know how this was going to go. Once I heard Chris Evans was on board in the initial premise, though, I started to get a lot more excited for this film. The marketing, I thought, was fantastic. Did a really great job at selling this film as truly something different that we really haven't gotten to see before, and so it became one of my most anticipated films, I think, of the entire year, also of the entire summer. And also the fact that this is the first Pixar movie in God knows how long to actually get a theatrical release. That especially was exciting me, because it has been so long that we've been able to say that. You know, Disney has continually fucked over Pixar, I don't know how many times at this point, and the fact that we were finally getting one that was actually going to, that was actually going to get a wide release in theaters and not just dumped onto Disney Plus, that really excited me, and it made me think Lightyear probably is really something special. There's a reason why they're making sure that this one is the one that's meant to be seen in theaters. It's not just because of like IP reasons and things like that. So you can imagine I was very excited to see this film, and I have now seen it, and I will say Lightyear is fun. That's the best way to describe this film. This is a very fun space adventure. Unfortunately, though, that's kind of all it really does boil down to. Lightyear is not quite as deep or profound as other Pixar movies have become, and I think because of that, it does end up becoming probably one of the lesser Pixar films, but still a really fun one. Like, I don't want to in any way downplay just how undeniably entertaining so much of this movie is, but I will admit there were some things that did kind of let me down. But we are going to get into right now, starting off with the voice cast. And right off the bat, the voice cast, I think, is undeniably the best thing about this entire movie. I think everyone does a really great job in this film. Let's talk about Chris Evans, because I know there is a bit of a controversy here, and I think a lot of people are just misconstruing what Disney has said. Disney has never said that they will never get Tim Allen back as this character. What they said is that this is a different iteration of Buzz Lightyear, and that's the best way to describe it. I think the best way to separate this Buzz Lightyear from the one we know in the Toy Story franchise is by getting a new voice actor, and Chris Evans, let me just say right off the bat, is fantastic in this movie. He does an excellent job as this character. He brings this confidence. He's just as charismatic as you want him to be, but I think he also brings some newer layers to Buzz that we really just haven't gotten to see before. The Buzz in this film He wants to be super independent. He wants to have all this agency. He wants to be the one, to go on all these missions and fix, and get everything done himself. He wants to be the greatest space ranger, and that's something that you really do find yourself latching onto, and I think that's something that Evans did a really good job with in this film. You really did feel that heroic presence from Buzz throughout this movie, and I think that's something that was really well done here. We never really gotten to see a Buzz that's like in his element, as a space ranger, and we get to see it here, and that's something I enjoyed. Aside from, obviously, the Buzz Lightyear of Star Command show, I'm talking about, like, movie-wise, we haven't really gotten to see that, and here we do very much get to see that, and Evans just does such a great job here. I loved what he ended up doing with the character, and I think after this movie, I definitely think, obviously I love Tim Allen's portrayal, but I think Evans' portrayal is just as strong, and I think really does anchor this movie quite nicely. There's an emotional moment, there's a moment in the first act especially that requires him to get quite emotional, and I think he really did sell it well. I really did like what he ended up doing here. But the other actor I think that really does stand out in this film is Keke Palmer, who does play the character of Izzy. Now, because of spoilers, I can't really get into the specifics of this character. What I will say, though, is that I think Palmer does a really good job in this role. She has really good chemistry with Evans throughout the movie. I think these two make a really good team in the film. You really do root for both of them, and her whole purpose of the film is one that I think it brings this emotional core to the story that otherwise wouldn't have had, and I think Palmer just does a really good job in this role. I really did like what she ended up doing here. I think, she brings, some authenticity to this character that works really well, so I thought she was a really big standout. As far as the rest cast goes, I think everyone does do a really good job here. Taika Waititi is a big standout, I think, as Mo. He's very funny in this movie. He's one of the he's one of the recruits that Buzz ends up with, and I think he's a lot of fun. Dale Souls I liked here a lot. She had me laughing frequently throughout this film. I liked what she ended up doing here a lot. Uzo Aduba is great for what she has. Isiah Whitlock Jr. is great in this movie. I really liked him a lot here. I thought he was a pretty big standout in this film, I would say. But I gotta say, maybe the scene stealer of the entire movie is Peter Sohn as Socks the cat. Look, this is a character that, yes, you can say he's just here to sell toys. That's the entire purpose of his character. But I don't care. This character is just so endearing and so funny, and at points steals the entire movie. I really liked what Sohn ended up doing in this role. He's able to bring humanistic layers to this, like, robotic cat, and I just really liked what he ended up doing here. I think Socks plays a much more integral role in the film than I think many are going to expect, and I really did love that a lot. I think Socks is a character that, yeah, he is very fun to watch. He is someone that can be a nuisance at points, but he is a trusted companion of Buzz Lightyear's, and I think he works very well as that. I just really liked what Sohn ended up doing in this movie. I think he was a huge standout for me, and I think when it comes to Lightyear, Socks is going to be one of the first things that people associate this film with, regardless of, toy sales and things like that, because trust me, Socks is going to be, like, one of the hottest selling toys of the year, for sure. Like, that's an inevitability at this point. Like, all Socks Funko Pops, Socks merch, what have you. Like, Socks is going to be huge, and I think... But I think when it comes to this movie, regardless of all of that, Socks is still going to be one of the first things that people think of, and I think he was just a really big standout. Really, the entire cast here, everyone does do a really great job here. I was very impressed by pretty much everyone in terms of the voice cast here. Alright, but now let's get to the directing and the writing, because this is where we get to the things that I think are really interesting about this film. Angus MacLane does direct this film. From what I understand, it's his first, like, feature-length film that he's directing. Prior to this, he's done a couple of the shorts. He did Bernie, which was, a short film on the DVD of WALL-E. He did a couple of the Toy Story tunes and things like that, but he's never really gotten a chance to be in this position position before, where he is, he is front and center when it comes to the directing of this movie, and I think he does ultimately do a pretty good job here. What I like about McLane's directing is that he is trying to do something really different to this film. This is not your typical Pixar fare at all. This very much does feel like this sci-fi type adventure, and I think he does do a really good job with it. Like I said, this movie at points can be really exhilarating. It has that summer blockbuster type feel, and very much does feel like something a kid like Andy would really like. But when it comes to the more emotional layers, I think he does a pretty good job with that too. I think he's able to blend the fun, but also this more emotional side. I think he blends those two things really well together. I like the adventurous type tone that is throughout this movie, and I think he does do a pretty good job with that. So I think his directing overall was really good. It's nothing absolutely spectacular, but I thought for what he needed to do, he did a good job with that. I think he does enough here to where this movie does stick out from the Toy Story franchise. You know, you have that quadrilogy, and you watch this movie, and it does feel distinctly different. That's why, when you do like rankings of the Toy Story franchise, I honestly don't recommend putting this in there because it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. This is very different tonally. This is very different in terms of, focus. All of that it's very different here, and I think that's something that McLane did a good job with. His writing, this is where we get to some of the issues with this film. Now, I will say the things that work really well in this movie, the first act of this film is spectacular. I absolutely loved what he was trying to do in the first act of this film. It's this very personal story about Buzz and him wanting to achieve a mission, and him kind of slowly recognize, him having this passion. This is what he wants to do. This is what matters to him the most. And him kind of slowly starting to realize the consequence of it. I think all of that was really well done. And also this friendship that Buzz does develop in the movie is one that you really just find yourself latching onto. It's very endearing, it's very sweet, and it's one of the highlights of the entire film. And there's a moment in the first act of this movie, it's like the first 20 or 30 minutes where I did find myself tearing up. It was a very effective moment because it did feel earned, and this first act, it was like, holy shit, this movie really is about to be like something really special, something that is unlike anything that we've seen in terms of, Pixar do before when it comes to like these really profound but like personal sci-fi adventures, because that's the best way to describe the first act of this movie. It feels very personal. It feels something like an Interstellar or something like that, where it's really trying to dive deep into like the consequences of space traveling and things like that. I think all of that is really well done in this movie. I really don't have too many complaints when it comes to the first act at all. But then the film does undergo a bit of a shift in the second and third act of this movie, and that's where the film was still good. Like, I don't want to say I didn't like the film. There was no point in this movie where I was absolutely just bored out of my skull and I didn't want to watch it anymore. I still enjoyed the second and third act of this movie. It's just was not on the level of what the first act was trying to accomplish. And I think the main reasoning is because the film undergoes a really big shift in terms of tone, in terms of story, and there's a lot of information that is presented to us. We're thrust into this whole new adventure. There's all these new characters, and a lot of it just feels very underwritten. There are things to latch onto. Like I said, the things that work really well in this movie, the dynamic between Buzz and Izzy, does work really well. You understand the very complicated type bond that these two characters do have. I thought that was played into very well in this movie. Izzy's a character, you do find yourself latching onto, and I thought that she does work really well. But there are other characters that are involved with this that just fell a bit flat for me. I enjoyed them in terms of what they did comedically. I enjoyed them in terms of, what they added to the story, but there isn't a lot going on there in terms of character, and I felt the film was kind of lacking in that sense. And once we did eventually go on this adventure, I just felt the film kind of rushed through it, and that was something that was just a little bit disappointing to me. There are a lot of themes that we get in those last 40 minutes of the movie that are just not dived into quite as well. In fact, probably the biggest disappointment in this movie, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is actually ZERG. ZERG obviously is the villain of this film. I don't think that's a shocker to anyone. You know, when you think of Buzz, one of the first things you think about is ZERG. ZERG does play a pretty big role in this movie, and for a while, ZERG is just ZERG. ZERG is lurking in the shadows. ZERG has a mission, but eventually there is a moment that comes up with ZERG that I thought was really interesting, and there's this decision that's presented to this character, and I thought it was a really cool idea. It felt like something that Pixar would naturally do. I thought we'd really get to see the weight of, you know, this decision, the impact this would have on a character. But before they could even take a second to really just soak it in and dive into this choice that this character's presented, the film just kind of abandons it and does absolutely nothing with it. And I was just so frustrated by this moment. This was easily the most frustrated that I was in the movie, because I felt like there was so much more untapped potential when it came to that character. So unfortunately, as much as I do like ZERG, he's not that great in this movie. They needed to do a lot more with him in order to really make him work. And after watching this, I feel like Toy Story 2 is the best we get of ZERG, not in the solo film that, you know, not in Buzz's own film. And I think that's kind of disappointing, considering that this was the time to, like, really amp up that feud between these two, really show, you know, how that conflict started brewing, you know, really get to present ZERG in a way that we haven't seen him before. And this movie does not do a very good job with that at all. So I felt the film was kind of lacking there. And like I said, just a few of these characters, I just needed more from them. I didn't dislike them per se, but I just felt they needed a little bit more development, so I found them to be a little bit lacking in that sense. So again, I do think the writing is still quite good here. There are a lot of funny moments throughout this movie that definitely did have me laughing quite a bit. Like I said, Socks as a character has so many great moments when it comes to his presence, the things that he can do. I think all of that is really well done. The movie does have a lot of interesting ideas, like I said, about space travel, but also about consequences. Time plays a big role in this movie, but a lot of these themes are just not dived into that well. And this is what was most surprising to me, because Pixar is always known for going to these deeper places, for telling these more complex stories, and I have to say, for this film, it just felt kind of light. This felt a little bit more just like kind of just a fun adventure than anything else. I've seen some people say that this movie, compared to Turning Red, would be the one you put on Disney Plus, and I would not go that far. I don't think this film is like Finding Dory, for example, where I feel like that movie is entirely wasted potential, because I do think there is a lot that this film does do right. I just think that, again, in terms of, you know, what Pixar is, you know, normally, you know, what we, you know, the expectation I have when it comes to Pixar, every time I watch a Pixar movie, I have really big expectations and things like that. This movie just kind of falls flat in terms of those more, you know, humanistic, those more deeper elements. The film doesn't really go there, and it felt like there were points where they almost did. They were on the cusp of going to somewhere a little bit more profound, and they get there in that first act, but like I said, you know, once the film undergoes a bit of a shift, it kind of just becomes a fun space adventure, and that was fine for what it was, but I just needed a little bit more going on. Also, I found that there were some opportunities to dive a bit deeper into this world that the movie just doesn't really take. There's really only a couple references to, you know, what we're really doing. I can't get into it too much. With that being said, these ideas are handled well. It's not like they handle them in like a cheap way or anything like that. I just think they could have gone a little bit deeper. They could have pushed it a bit more, and they just didn't. It felt like the movie, again, just felt a little too quick in that way, and that was something that did overall disappoint me a bit, because it involves spoilers and what the actual plot of this movie really is, because I feel like they've actually done a pretty good job of hiding what's really at stake here. But what I will say is I think that when it comes to the actual, the world that we're in, I just wanted to see a little bit more than what they initially gave us. But the things that do work is that, like I said, that dynamic between Buzz and Izzy and the way you really do latch onto both of them. That's what really did keep me invested. But it's also the animation here, which is absolutely just state of the art. And I mean, that's not surprising when it comes to Pixar. I feel like every film, they are just constantly just blowing us away more and more. But what I really like about the animation in Lightyear is that you can tell that Pixar made a concerted effort to make sure that Lightyear is not synonymous in terms of its animation with their other films. It looks different distinctively. The humans look different. The foregrounds look different. All of that stuff. I thought they did a really good job with it. It does feel like when watching this movie that you're kind of watching a movie within a movie. You can almost feel like there are two different animation styles. The way that Buzz looks in this film, yeah, obviously he has the suit, but like, the face is different and things like that. I thought they did a really good job with that. I really enjoyed the animation in this film. It's super detailed. These space sequences are absolutely exhilarating to watch, and there are some really good action sequences throughout this movie. There's a really good chase scene of sorts that I definitely really did enjoy quite a bit, and also just again the world building I think also is very strong in this film. That's something else that I thought that they did a really good job with here. So the animation, as always, it's really colorful. It's really distinctive. No one's really doing it like Pixar in terms of animation. I say this all the time, but it really is true. Nobody is doing it like Pixar. Something I also cannot complain about at all is Michael Giacchino's score. Holy shit. I mean, this guy just knocks it out of the park every single time, and he creates such a incredible theme to this film. It's one that you're gonna find yourself humming constantly. It sucks you into the action. It ups the intensity. It ups the impact. I mean, he does a really great job, I think, when it comes to the theme in this movie. I really liked what he ended up doing in terms of the score here. Mission Perpetual. He released it like a couple weeks before the movie, and after watching the film I can see why, because that particular score, that track that's on the soundtrack, I definitely recommend listening to that alone, because I think this is some really great work from Giacchino. Just always does such a great job with these very big bombastic scores, and he definitely does not disappoint here. I loved what he ended up doing in this film. It's very heroic. It's very it just gives you, like I said, this sense of thrill, and I liked what he ended up doing with the score here a lot. And the editing. This is my other problem with this film. I think this film is a little too short. I understand it's a Pixar movie. You don't want it to be super long, but I think this movie needs to at least be around the length of, like, say, Incredibles 2. Incredibles 2 is a movie that I think I believe is over 2 hours, and I think this movie needed to be as well, especially with how much is established, after the film takes a bit of a turn. I think they needed to dive a bit deeper into some things, and I don't think the film was quite as well paced as it really needed to be. Also, the way the movie does end, I did really like quite a bit. I will definitely say, while there were things that I was underwhelmed by, the ending definitely was not one of them. I thought the actual, last 10 minutes or so was very satisfying. I really did like the way they wrapped up this film quite a bit, and it felt like there was a really good character arc for Buzz and for Izzy as characters that I think overall definitely did come to a forefront pretty well in this film. Overall, I did have a lot of fun with Lightyear. I think this movie has a lot of fun moments. It has some really great performances, especially from Chris Evans, Keke Palmer, and Peter Sohn. Some very funny moments, some fantastic animation, especially when it comes to space travel and things like that, that really just shows how Pixar is leagues above other studios when it comes to that stuff. But it lacks a bit, I think, in terms of thematic depth. It lacks a bit in terms of its story, and I think that's where the film did fall flat a bit for me. What really does save it, though, is the fun and adventure that is brought throughout the entire movie. I think the characters are a lot of fun. I think the potential is definitely there, and if Pixar is going to give us a Lightyear 2, I would be down for that. I am not against Pixar potentially crafting a, potential franchise here. If they want to do more with this character, I'm more than excited to see what they can do. I just feel like there was a little bit more potential with some things, and the film did not quite live up to it, and that's where it did fall a bit flat for me. I think that it's not it's not that I disliked this movie. I do want to say that I did overall like this movie. I just think there were quite a few things that they could have done a little bit better. But for what Lightyear is, I think it does work pretty well. Again, the intention of this movie is that it wants to present itself as this is the film that Andy fell in love with, and that's what got him to get the Buzz Lightyear and things like that. And I think the film does overall work as that. This film is definitely a lot of fun. This is a film that I think, kids are going to love. I think adults are really going to enjoy it as well. And it's just really great to get to see a Pixar movie in theaters. Again, I hope that we're able to see many more of them. And for a film like Lightyear, especially in what's been, I think, a pretty up and down summer so far, it's definitely a film that I very much did have a good time with. And I think if you're looking for just a really fun space adventure, nothing too profound, nothing too, deep in that way, I think Lightyear overall does very much satisfy. It's not quite on the level of some of Pixar's other films for me, but overall I did have a really good time with it, and I am going to give it a B-. But over, guys, to my review of Lightyear. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. All of your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.